there's a weekly column that I write. You can go and just subscribe to it. It doesn't cost anything. And you get the columns. There are other presentations like this one that are available online, so you can watch them. And subscribing. And I write once a week because I don't really have time to do more than that, so I don't bother you. This is the more important thing. I'm prettier, but look at that. Because that's the thing that means more. Let me begin by telling you a little bit about myself. I am a teacher here in Pennsylvania. I have over 35 years of experience in education in special ed and regular ed. I've taught everything from preschool through college. I've taught pretty much every classroom setting you can imagine, from regular classrooms to self-contained special ed classrooms, to resource rooms, to college, university settings. When I was in grad school, I worked in the psychometric testing clinic, because you know when you're a grad student, you're like a slave. So my job as a grad assistant was to actually work in the testing clinic where they administered the psychometric tests. So I've administered them, scored them, and diagnosed children based on them. I was a advisor to President Reagan's Commission on the Family, and for a number of years I worked for the United States Department of Education. And my job was to review and evaluate education reform initiatives. I have a lot of experience in what we're going to talk about tonight. The documents you are going to see, I didn't write any of them, and you will be looking at original documents. Sometimes you're going to be looking at information that Pennsylvania gave Washington to receive a grant, money, or relief from regulations. And the reason we look at that kind of document is because they're legal. You know, like when you go to the bank and you want a loan, and the bank says, how much money did you make? And you say, $10,000, and the bank says, that's really cute. Let me see your IRS tax return. Because you might lie to the bank, but you probably didn't lie to the IRS, because it's a crime. Similarly, if the state of Pennsylvania tells you that they're doing X, but they told Washington in a document that they use to get money or relief from regulations that they're doing Y, they're doing Y. Because it's not a crime to lie to you, but it is a crime to lie to Washington, D.C. on a contract document. So we will be looking at those documents to see what did they tell Washington, and then comparing it to what they told you. We will also be looking at newspaper articles and internal documents from the department, or training documents that they're handing out, and in some cases we'll be looking at actual textbooks. Before I forget, up here in the front there are 3 videos. I'm going to feed you through a fire hose. And when you go home you'll go, what did she say? I got it while she was talking, but I don't remember it. So what I did was we created 3 videos. They're in the front, and my husband, who's sitting here, he's going to raise his hand, there he is. He'll be there at the end, so you can get them if you like. The first one is called, Should Our Children Be Standardized? The theory behind Common Core is that the government can set one standard, and all the children will learn on that schedule. Does that work? There's actually research about what happens in classrooms when you try to do that. And so if you want to know the facts, this is in Should Our Children Be Standardized? This video also contains information on the new Advanced Placement U.S. History course that the College Board is promoting. It's created controversy all over the country. This is the history course that teaches American history without mentioning people like Thomas Jefferson or John Adams, and teaches World War II without mentioning Dwight Eisenhower or Adolf Hitler. So if you want to know what's happening there, this is the one for you. The second one is actually a Pennsylvania specific. It'll have Pennsylvania documents. A lot of the things you'll be looking at tonight are in this video that's called Pennsylvania. And the third one is called Invalid and Unreliable. They say that the tests of Common Core are valid and reliable. Those words are not just window dressing. They mean something. And the tests of Common Core fail the definition at every level. And so what I did was I walked through the research and what does it mean to be valid and reliable, and then compare it to the Common Core tests so that you can see that the tests really don't measure up. So there's 3 different ones to pick from. I have to pay to make them, so we ask for $10 and the money just circles around, because then I use your $10 to make more for the next people. So they're available in the front at the end, and you can help yourself, and my husband will be happy to help you. Now this is a long story, we don't want to be here all night, so we're going to start in 1989. In 1989, President Bush the Elder had a summit meeting with the National Governors Association. At the time, the chairman was a man named William Clinton, so you had an R and a D. The summit was to basically break local control in education in America and set national education goals that would be applicable to everyone. That summit eventually led to the passage of a piece of federal legislation called Goals 2000. Mr. Clinton was president at the time. There was a huge amount of opposition to Goals 2000. At that point, the underlying structure was called outcome-based education, and many of you probably remember it was a huge debate in America at that time. As a result of the opposition of everybody, Goals 2000 didn't have any teeth. So while it required that the states set standards for the children and then make their education move to the standards, there was no punishment attached. That was changed in 2001 with the passage of the No Child Left Behind Act. There is no constitutional role for the federal government in education.
Right.
If you read the Constitution from the beginning until the end, you won't see the word education appear in it anywhere. How did the federal government get around it? They made money available. They said to the states, here's money. Did you want it? If you don't want it, you don't have to comply. But if you want it, you are volunteering to comply with our agenda. The first huge portion of money was actually made available in 1965. It was called the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It was passed when Lyndon Johnson was president, and it was part of his war on poverty. And so the ESEA, Elementary and Secondary Education Act, made billions of dollars available to the states based on the poverty numbers in those states. It was called a formula grant. You turned in your poverty numbers and you got this much money, and it was district specific. When the federal government gives money, they say we're going to give this much money for this much time. When the time ends, the money ends, which means the program ends. Or they reauthorize the funding stream. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act has been reauthorized a number of times since 1965. The 2001 reauthorization was called No Child Left Behind. It's actually a continuation of a 1965 education program. No Child Left Behind was passed when Bush the Jr. was president. So we had Bush the Senior, who was an R, and Clinton, who was a D, and Bush the Jr., who was an R. So you can see this really doesn't have anything to do with traditional party lines. What did No Child Left Behind say? It said that every state had to set content standards and achievement standards for all the children. What's the difference? A content standard. This is what the teacher must teach. An achievement standard. This is what the child must learn. It is a direct mandate from the government to the individual child. That's a real change in definition. Because with No Child Left Behind, the federal government moved its role from guaranteeing equal opportunity to all of the children to requiring equal results from all of the children. That was a real change in education policy. The standards were applicable to every public school student, and that includes charter schools because they are public schools, and they were to be set in math and reading and eventually science. The standards were supposed to be rigorous. Rigorous is a marketing word. Every time that the Common Core proponents talk about the standards, they talk about the rigorous Common Core standards. They never use a synonym, and they never leave the word off. In marketing, if you wanted to stick in someone's head, you say it again and again and again. Tonight we're going to look at how rigorous is defined. The state had to set achievement levels for the children. Advanced is what you think. Proficient would be passing, that you actually could do it. And then basic, which would be a C- or a D. The states were given goals. Every year, this many more children have to test proficient. And every district within the state had its own set of goals. So you had to have 39% of your children. I made that number up. 39% of your children had to be proficient. And then the next year, 45% had to be proficient. That was adequate yearly progress. When you hear this conversation and you talk to school districts, they say, but if we don't do this, we won't meet our AYP. AYP is adequate yearly progress. They were federally mandated goals. This many children have to be proficient, and every year more children had to reach the bar. How did they know? And this language is right out of the No Child Left Behind. This is the law. Like you're looking at the language of the law. The states had to create yearly assessments. And that's how the children were measured, on the assessment tests. In Pennsylvania, you remember, they were called the PSSA. Originally, they were called the PASS, Pennsylvania Assessment System. Now they're called the Pennsylvania State System of Assessment, so they've changed the language. The tests are given every year starting in grade 3, and the law mandated that 12 years after the law was passed, so it was passed for the 2001-2002 school year. 12 years later, that would be 2013-14, 100% of the students, all the students, had to test proficient by government mandate. Everybody, every child in the state had to be proficient. But you could define proficient wherever you wanted. So what did the states do? Let me show you. Stand up. Wiggle while you're